Welcome back to the Intuitively Led podcast. I am your host, Julie Chandler. I am all things universe with over 18 years of experience connecting to and understanding, interpreting energy, and especially within your business. So today I am following on from last week's episode. Last week I talked about asking the universe for a sign, asking for guidance, but this week we're going to talk a little bit more about interpreting the signs from the universe, especially for that aligned action in your business, okay? So now, last week I shared with you a story about the sign of the Christmas tree. Now, with that, I had specifically asked for that sign and for that guidance. So I didn't know whether I should be looking for a new job or whether I should stay fully self-employed. And I asked the universe to show me a fully dressed Christmas tree if I should stay self-employed. And in February, so 2 months after Christmas, in February, they had delivered me that sign within a day. So that's how you can interpret those signs, because it's super, super clear. But there are also signs that aren't clear. And it's kind of a sense of how to interpret those. Now, because when you do interpret them and you start working with those signs that aren't asked for, but that are provided by the universe, it's such a powerful thing. So I'm going to talk first of all about the energy that I have been working with this year, so 2023. And actually it started in 2022. So I've always been big on signs. I have tattoos of magpies on my legs because they represent my granddad, because the first time I was ever told about signs in my early 20s, I was told, like, look for those synchronicities. When you see those synchronicities, that is your granddad showing up. Now, my granddad is not someone I knew. He died when my dad was like 3, 4. I mean, the story changes. So every time I hear the story, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 4. Now, I typically say 4, but he passed away when my dad was very, very young. So I had no way to know him or connect with him, yet I know him. Like, I really know him. I know his personality. I know his sense of humor because I've connected with him spiritually and energetically. And he is one of my guides. So after I was first told that, so let me tell you first that experience, right? So the first time I ever spoke to a psychic, she told me that I had seen my granddad. And she described a scene where at the time I lived in a loft room it was a split level flat with a flatmate of mine. And so mine was like, literally you had to go all the way up to the loft. So it was just a staircase up to this like crooked door where this loft space was, and that was my room. And it was massive. It was bigger than some of the studio flats that I've lived in as well. So it was huge. It was a very old house as well. And basically, I didn't sleep with the door closed. I didn't need to because no one was coming up the stairs. And one night I'd woken up and I could see a figure. I could see the outline of a shadow in the door. And I just leant over and closed the door. And I never told anyone that. But this lady knew. So she said to me, your granddad's telling me that you've seen him. And I was like, really? Like, not thinking. She was like, oh, yeah, you've seen him at the top of the stairs in the doorway. And it blew me away. And from that day on, I was like, this is weird and it is real. Now, keeping in mind, this woman didn't know me. We were just on the phone as well. So it wasn't even like it was something that she could have like sussed or figured out or anything. There was no way. And I'm laughing because I was just thinking back to that moment of like, whoa, like the power of being like, that's crazy. I mean, and she did tell me as well that I would be doing this work eventually where I am. She's like, oh yeah, you're psychic too. But yeah, so this was like back in my early 20s and I'm now in my late 30s. So from that day, she'd said, look out for the synchronicities. And I had then started seeing magpies every single day, everywhere I went. And what's so funny is that so many people now associate magpies with me. So those who have worked with me since my 20s will be able to like completely agree that, you know, they see magpies now and they think of me because of that connection. But it's a beautiful thing for me, and magpies still do represent my granddad, and I still do like tip my hat and smile and say hello to him when I see these magpies, and I see them a lot. Now, birds have definitely been, from day one, as I've just explained, have been a sign that come to me. And there are a lot of animals that come to me. I mean, that was why I worked as an animal healer to start with. I remember the time that my ex-boyfriend told me that I wasn't spiritual because I swear. So that's a story for another day. Bollocks, by the way, just to say that. And straight away, at the time, I was like studying to be an animal healer. So I was doing animal crystal healing, spiritual healing, and animal Reiki at the same time. And I was studying and doing that. And I was adamant that was going to be my whole life path. I mean, it's brought me here, but yeah, we do different things now. But literally after that, me and him, we stopped speaking for a little while because like it was a huge argument. And to tell somebody who is like investing their time and life into being spiritual to be told they're not spiritual, I mean, it wasn't a fun time. But every single day after that, animals just appeared. To the point that there was a squirrel that came in my house, a fox that came in my house, a stray cat that came in my house. There was a fox that walked straight up to me in the street. There was just so many things. I remember paying for a parking ticket and a bird flew down and stood on the parking meter in front of me and then flew off again. Stuff like that. These are signs from the universe. I know that, but a lot of people might see that and just be like, well, that was weird. And it's hard to interpret. And when you do start to look at things and interpret things, it's such a powerful tool. So let me talk to you about how these hawks, right? Because this is the biggest one for me ever. And I didn't ever think I would be this person to say, like, listening to the signs can be transformational, because it sounds corny and it sounds like super woo when I'm just not necessarily that person. And the universe kind of just laughed at me with this, because this summer, the last summer gone, I was driving down to the south of France. Now, in the lead up to that, I had been seeing deer everywhere. So they'd been coming out in tarot readings. They'd been coming up on videos. They'd been on my walks with JC. So I'd seen deer everywhere. So I was surprised when on my drive down to the south of France, so keeping in mind, it's like a 2-day drive, and I'm driving, and I just keep seeing like hawks in the sky. And I'm like, this is crazy. I've never seen this many. And at the time, I didn't think it was the universe. I just thought, oh, it's just France, right? And there are certain videos that I actually look back on now where I'm walking with JC and you can see hawks flying through the canyon that I'm walking in. And I'm like, wow, in retrospect, but like they were just there. They were there all the time. They were circling. And I had a transformational moment when I was in France last year. There was this time where the first part of the court case with my ex-employer, that had finished and I had been awarded to say X, Y, and Z. So I had won that first part. I had like that sense of feeling inside of me of like, it was uncovered her lies, you know, well, the envy was clear, let's put it that way, had come out. And so I had this sense of like, not a rebirth, but it was like letting go of that. And I just felt more open and much more aware while I was in France last summer. So I kept, and I also went for a rebranding process, and the hawk and the deer just kept coming up. And I actually did a meditation where I was actually linked back to a past life. So I know this is super woo, but I was linked back to a past life where I was in Egypt, which I've actually been told about before. There's a certain time in history that I won't go into too many details, but there is a certain period in history where I was apparently a very powerful high priestess, as powerful as in magic. So I could heal and I could do all of the things that I can do now, but yeah, in a different capacity. So I was brought back to that because of like Horus with the hawk head. And then I was shown like the eye, and that, like researching that, I was like, whoa, okay, this really makes sense. And then there was another link. So during this branding session that I had been doing, shout out to Beck Morris, by the way, if anyone ever wants branding done, she is the girl to go to. But during this process, all of this information was coming up and out. And I was talking about the fact of like the type of people that I want to work with. And it kept coming up about how I wanted to really direct my business towards business women, people who want to make money from their spiritual abilities, who want to make money from helping people, and that being my thing. It had been an underlying thing for years. It actually started back in 2020 when I had actually beta tested a program for using tarot, Reiki, intuition within business coaching capacity. It just hadn't fully shaped and formed. But during our conversations throughout this branding process, I was talking about that energy, and I was talking about the fact that I wanted to work with people who have big vision, so their air element, and I wanted to work with the action people because the fire element is very, very, very important to me. You will hear me say this in every single episode. Take action where the energy doesn't want to stay still. So that was important to me. And over the years, I've worked with people who don't take action and who do sit down and don't take those steps forwards. And that's okay. Like, not everybody has the action, and that's okay. But I want to work with the action people. I want to work with the doers. So this was coming up, especially in the branding talks and the communication and like the focus for the business, and all of this kind of stuff was coming up for me while I was in France last summer, while these hawks and the deer were very present. And when I'd looked online, and this is also interesting as well. So again, when you're asking for a sign from the universe, I'm going to prerequisite this here. When you're asking for a sign and you look something up, trust your instinct and your gut on what page you click on, because you are supposed to see what you see. Right? Because there is a lot of information and it crosses over and it contradicts itself, especially about energy and interpreting energy. So what you see is what you are supposed to see. And the example I give here is, I was actually thinking, I was like, oh, I imagine that the deer is earth energy and that the hawk is air. But when I looked it up, the first pages I clicked on, the deer was the air energy, and the hawk was the fire energy. And it happened to be within those limits of us talking about the type of people that I work with and want to work with and want to bring into my business. So that was so interesting for me. And having looked at it again, like 6 months later, it's different. The hawk represents, so I've actually then had books like shamanic animal guide books that talk about the hawk being the air element. And I'm like, nah, it was the fire element when I looked it up. So again, going back to last week's episode about like writing stuff down, because if I'd have forgotten that fact, if I'd have forgotten that point, I might have missed that when I'm reevaluating the information and looking at it again. But for me, this was like so powerful. And again, they were coming up all the time. And I came back. So when did I come back? October, late September, early October. I came back to the UK and I kind of just sort of, I came down to reality, right? So I was like working, busy. And I knew that I wanted to do a new thing. And I knew that it was time that the next year, so 2023, this year that we're in now, was the time that I would be launching something new, that it would be the blend between my business experience and my spiritual connection and psychic abilities, using intuition, etc. I knew that these two would come together. I just didn't know how, and I hadn't really known how. So the stuff that I'd done beta launches and bits and pieces before in the past to combine the two hadn't felt 100% right, and they weren't in the capacity that I wanted. And I've been working with coaches and within programs to look at messaging and positioning and all of this kind of thing. And there'd been like little nuggets of like, maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, maybe that. But when it came to the end of the year, I'd started to run really low energy wise. There were certain things that I was doing. So there were certain clients that I was working with, and there wasn't anything wrong with the clients, like at all, like nothing. It was easy work on paper, but it didn't fit right. So it was causing me stress internally, my own stress, my own pressure, because I didn't want to do the work. So I was then cycling around of like, why am I doing this if I don't want to do it? Why am I sitting here forcing myself to do work that I don't want to do? So it was very important for me to trust my body, to trust the energy that I was getting, and I needed a step back. Now, it didn't make sense on paper. It didn't make sense on paper. It's like, I need that income, that I'm going to end this contract. This doesn't make sense on paper, but I did it anyway. I listened to my body. My body said, you are not healthy right now. You need to focus on that. If something is making you feel a certain way, if something is stressing you out, which is then contributing to like what you're eating is changing, your hormones are changing, your migraines are changing because you're stressing yourself out, don't do it. So I removed myself from those situations. And I felt bad. I felt guilty because it wasn't logical. But I trusted the messages that my body was giving me. I trusted that the universe would have my back. And then the universe started showing up with hawks. Now, I wish there was enough time for me to go into full detail of the level and the amount of hawks that I have encountered. But I started walking JC in a new location. And one day we were leaving this beautiful woods in Norfolk in the UK. And literally just turned out of the car park and you drive down a road that's like surrounded by trees on either side. And all of a sudden, this beautiful, beautiful, I think it was a red kite for those who are into birds. He flew down like he was going to hit the windscreen and then flew in front of the car. Like he was huge, like his wingspan was bigger than JC. And he was flying just like at my eye height as I'm driving. And he flew in front of me for a good like 50 meters and then flew up into the tree. He picked something up in the tree, then came back down and flew in front of me again and then flew off. And I was like, whoa, that's never happened before. Now, what was interesting is that I actually told my parents this, and they have lived in Norfolk and they like to go bird watching, and that's never happened to them. They've never had a hawk fly in front of their car. And then the next day, it sort of happened again. Right? And the next day, so granted, it wasn't necessarily right in front of the car, but there was like one that nearly hit the car and then flew up. There was one that like crossed across the road flying, and then they were just happening all the time. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is happening. And I kind of tapped back into, well, when did this start happening? And I was like, right, it happened in France. So what did that mean to me? What did that feel like? It was exciting. I'd connected to what I wanted to do, who I wanted to work with, right, tap back into that some more. And this is what I want for you, is to know that you can tap back into that and know that, you know, something that happens like that is not normal. When it's not normal, when something's repeating itself, it's not normal, right? At all. I mean, these birds were following me for months. And the way I started working with them was I started to try to evaluate things. So I'd realized that what I was seeing was birds, because it then became a thing of I would see them on the side of the road like you normally do, where you see them quite high up and they're hunting. And it was the same. I would see, you know, the ones that were flying in front of the car, that was like 3 times that happened. And then it kind of sort of stopped. They were then flying. I would see them flying and hovering and being up high. And I actually spoke to somebody that I'd gone for some spiritual session with. And I asked her, and I said, there's hawks that are following me. Is there anything like that you can share on that? And she'd said, well, there's just something you're not seeing yet. And I was like, well, that makes perfect sense, because I'm starting to put together this brand new offer. And I feel like that's what they're talking about. Because on these walks, whenever I would see these walks and hawks, I would be thinking about my offer. I would be thinking about how it sits, how it works, how I'm working with people already, how I've worked with people for years, what bits worked, what bits do I resonate with, what bits sit well with who I want to work with, what I want to help people with. All of these things and questions were going through my mind. And I started to realize that when there were certain aha moments of like, wow, that makes perfect sense, I would then see a hawk. And it was like that confirmation of like, write that down. So I started writing things down. I started voice noting myself, having them transcribed. I started taking that information and putting it and building it. And I kept seeing these hawks over and over again. And it really wasn't even just on my walks. So from them then popping up on my phone to them coming out in readings again, and then to like seeing statues of them when I'm out and about that I'd never seen before, to there was one day where, because they do fly near my house as well. And they'd started doing that a lot more. And there was one day I walked, well, there was just like, one day I walked into the bedroom in the back of the house. And I was like, why have I walked in here? And then one just flew past the window. And I was like, okay, that was why I walked in here. Or the day that I was watching a TV show, I think it's called Manifest on Netflix. And for anyone who has watched that, know that there are supernatural layers to it. But I actually started watching that in France, right? So it was the new season. I'm like, I'm going to binge watch this new season. And I was watching it, and there was a point where they reference peacocks and their spiritual connection, and they were looking up what the peacock means. And it reminded me. So I was like, I'm going to look up and see if I can buy a book on hawks. And I looked, and I'm starting to read about this one book, and all of a sudden I can hear hawks. I can hear them. And I flick back to the tab of Netflix, and there's hawks on there. There's like eagles. And I was just like, oh my God. So I brought that book. And it wasn't a book that was a spiritual book, and it was literally about hawks. So it talked about their personalities. It talked about like how they are, how they hunt, what they do, like all of this kind of stuff, which was really important for me. I wanted to know more about the energy that the universe was using to communicate with me, because that's what it was. I was building this brand new concept out of all of my experience, out of all of my power, out of all of my knowledge and my wisdom. And the universe was fully guiding me on that. It really, really was. And then one day I was like, right, if there's something I'm not seeing, let's figure it out. So I did what I now call Hawkeye view in my business. And I wrote down every single thing that is within my business, every single thing. Every element, every workflow, every single touch point, every single thing that I can do, everything that I want to do. And I started to piece it together in a way of, right, well, this is what I do, and this is what I know works. This is tried and tested. I can also bring in these elements, and I can bring in these elements and make it this much better. And this is what it will look like. And then I started using the names, like the terminologies that I use. Pivot Ripple was confirmed by a hawk. BU was confirmed by a hawk. There were so many things that came out that were confirmed by the hawk. It was like, okay, this is great. And the whole time I was building this as if it was a program. And what was so funny is that after I'd done the Hawkeye view of my business, the next hawk I saw was flying low. So he'd gone from really high to flying low. And I was like, oh, this means I'm getting close. I'm getting close to the ground. I'm getting closer to the destination. And the next week or so, the birds were flying low, the birds were flying down, the birds were coming down. They were flying from tree to tree. They were low. They weren't high anymore. They weren't hovering anymore. They were like doing little bits and pieces, but coming lower and lower. And it got to the point that I was like, right, I think I've worked out exactly what this consists of. This is 100% what my offer is going to be. This makes perfect sense to me. It feels really great. And I didn't know if I was there. So I asked the universe, I'm like, well, tell me if I'm there. And then I'm driving to the same woods that I walk in, and I saw a hawk sitting in a tree. And there he was. He didn't move. He didn't jump when I drove past. He didn't, nothing. He was just sat there. And I'm like, I think I might be there. And then I saw another one sitting in the tree the next day. And then on the way home, so that was the second one, on the way home, again, with my taking the wrong turnings, I turned left. I didn't mean to turn left. I was meant to turn right. And as I turned, I was like, why have I turned here? What have I done? and then did a 3-point turn in the road. And as I did that, I looked up into the tree that I was doing it next to, and there he was. He was just sat there. Just sat there. He wasn't even looking at me. His back was turned. He was watching across the field. He was just he was just there. I was like, wow, that's number 3. And 3 for me is quite a powerful number. Things happen in 3s, right? We know that. It's kind of like, it's a manifestation number, 369. Those are manifesting numbers. So I was like, I think I'm there. I said to the universe, I said, right, show me. I was like, if this is it, if this is the program, if this is the thing that I'm going to do, show me. The next one I see needs to be in a stationary sitting position. He needs to be done. No word of a lie. Woke up in the morning, Google alert on my phone. Like, this is a random Google alert from somewhere in Yorkshire where there is an injured bird, and you click on it and the picture right there is just that hawk, and he's standing on the street. He's down on the ground. He's not flying. There he is, number 4. I asked for number 4, I got number 4. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm done. This is my offer. This is my thing. It is here and it is ready. So I started planning that. What was also interesting is that I then realized that I didn't know whether I wanted to do it as one-to-one or a group program. And I happened to be listening to, I hadn't seen any hawks for like a week, 2 weeks now. And I happened to be listening to a podcast by Brandon Lacero. So I'm within Brandon's NGM program. And I was listening to his podcast where he was talking about if he would start his business again, what he would do. And he talked about how he would do like one-to-one before he did a group program. And I literally, I was like, maybe I should do that. That's what I should do. Like, let me run this one-to-one first. Let me work intimately with these people. Let me do this, because this is where I get those connections. And especially when you're working with energy, like the one-to-one work is so powerful, so transformational. And just as I'm like, yeah, that's what I need to do, as I'm driving, a hawk flies from the ground up, like launched, right? And my breath, I was like, wow. And I'm not even joking. I literally said, wow, because it was beautiful. It was huge, like beautiful bird. And up he goes. And then I burst out laughing because I'm like, yeah, it's time to launch. In my head, I was all ready to go for Q2. But this bird said, nah, you're going now. It's time. Do the thing. So granted, I am going in Q2, but I had run the launch. We are running the launch. We are working with a select few people. But if I didn't know how to interpret the signs, this offer, this program that is going to change people's lives, that is going to help bring so much ease into their business, that might not have happened. So I want to talk to you just about a couple of points about how you can use these kind of signs. Now, I'm not saying that the hawks are going to be smacking you in the face like they practically are with me, because the funny thing as well with these hawks, right? So the week after, so now I'd started getting people to sign up for this program. I had a moment where I was leaving the park, not the park, the woods again. And the hawk flew down the road like it did on day one, like the first hawk I saw in front of me. Granted, it wasn't for as long, but there it was. It flew down the road. It was right in front of me in exactly the same position that it had happened before. And for me, that was like full circle, like all the way around. Like, it's just go time. You're ready. And that message was just so powerful. It actually brought me to tears, because it was like, you cannot make this shit up. You cannot make this shit up. And it's so powerful when you use it, because that inspired me to create this new thing that I know was not only created by me, my experience, my skill set, but was also given to me by the universe. Because I got to work with the universe in a way of, I might have an uncertainty here, let me use that energy, and it confirmed it. All of this stuff is powerful. So although you may not have signs in that same way, what I want for you, first of all, is to be able to recognize when something is a sign. So as I said, if something is repeating itself over and over again, hello, big flashing sign. Okay. So do notice when something doesn't feel the norm. Now, it doesn't have to feel weird. It doesn't have to feel spooky. It doesn't have to feel like magical. But if you notice something, if you're sitting in your garden and all of a sudden you notice your robin and you're like, I don't normally notice these. And then he moves a bit closer, you were meant to notice that robin. If you're sitting in your car and there is a white feather that falls to the floor, but it hits your windscreen first, you were meant to notice that. It's about really recognizing something as different. So it's about finding what is standing out for you. So you can ask for any sign. Now, last week I was talking about asking for a specific sign for an answer to a question. But if you want to see something from the universe and say, communicate to me via the cats, communicate to me with horses, whatever it is, you know, or just let those signs come to you and just acknowledge those signs. So I'd been working with the deer, I'd been working with the hawk, and I will continue to work with those energies 100%. They are not going anywhere. The hawk now is an integral part of my BU aligned program. That hawk eye vision, so important. So important. So understanding that when you start to pay attention to your intuition, because your intuition includes seeing signs in the physical, but your signs might come in your body. So like in the same way I said, my body wasn't reacting well to the work I was doing. I needed to cancel that contract to have the space to go for those walks, to connect with the hawks, to connect with the ideas, the concepts, and have that space and that breathing room. I needed that. If I hadn't have listened to my intuition in the first place, I may have missed all of that. And that program that I have now pulled out of me, which is super powerful, super transformative, may have that idea, that concept, may have gone to somebody else. Because that's how energy works. It wants to move. So allowing yourself to recognize the signs in your intuition, what intuition is for you, how it's communicating with you, is just step one. Trusting and surrendering and allowing those things to come to you, listening to them and responding to them, super, super powerful. So recognizing when something isn't the norm. Now, in determining the message, there are multiple ways that you can do this. So if there is something and you're like, what does this mean? Ask what it means to you first. Before you look anything up, ask what it means for you. So I'm trying to think of something different. Let's talk about a different animal, right? I mean, even if we just went to a deer or a stag. So for me, if I'm seeing a deer, it can mean multiple things. So I'm like, okay, well, they're very tentative. They're very cautious. They are very earthbound. So are there things, is there grounding I need to do? Is there something I need to look at further? Is there something I need to be aware of? Am I listening to my intuition? That would be the things that it means to me. But that might mean something very different to you. You might see a deer and think of Bambi. You might then think of Disney and think of childhood and joy and that kind of thing. It's a very different energy. So a deer for me might mean one thing, a deer for you might mean another. And that is why the first thing in determining the message of that from the universe is determining what it means for you. So before you even look it up, before you Google it, before you tell anyone, ask anyone, take some time. What does it mean to you? Then you can start looking it up. Start Googling it. But again, like I said before, make sure that one, you're writing down the things. So write down that you got the sign. Write down what it means for you personally, right? So write down what it was doing, what it felt like, what the action was. So again, hawks flying high, flying lower, sitting, launching, right? There's different levels to the way that that's moving and how I can interpret those messages. You also really want to, then when you're looking online, looking it up in books, feel like you're actually called to it. See what stands out. So you might open a book, read it and go, that doesn't feel right. But I'm seeing that one word, that word sticking out. I'm going to take that word. Then you look at another page and it's slightly different, because everywhere online will tell you something different. There is a different interpretation. There is a different message. So if you sit there and you troll through 80 different pages, you're going to confuse yourself. But if you listen to your intuition, so what I would actually do, right, this is what I personally do as well. So when I Google something, I don't actually read what it's saying, right? So where it gives you the title and then the little bump underneath, I actually look at the website address, because I find, for me, again, this is just me, there are things in the website address that I'm like, oh, that one. So sometimes there might be something of like, I don't know, I'm just thinking of like, if I was looking up, so last night I was looking up some dream interpretations. And if I put like in, what do hawks mean in a dream? And then there was one that said lunar dream dictionary, right? Just as an example, that one might stand out more than dream dictionary. So even though dream dictionary is probably at the top, or find your dream dictionary, right? And then it's like lunar dream dictionary. And I'm like, well, lunar makes sense for me. My dog was born on a full moon. I work with moon cycles. I'm clicking on that one. And then I'm looking at what that says. And I guarantee you, if I then click into the other ones, it will be the lunar one that made sense for me, that was more clear for me. And that's what you need to do when you're looking and researching. Still listen to your intuition. Don't click on everything. Your intuition will tell you where the message is that you need to hear. So look it up, find what it says, and really look to explore that. So writing it down, right? And then it's a case of like aligning that message with your values and purpose. Is it highlighting the type of people you need to work with, right, within your values? So for me, it was highlighting my values of who do I work with, what do I do, and my purpose. It aligns with what I'm good at, right? So if you look at Hawk Vision is one, high vision, big vision to the future, minute details as well. That's something I am brilliant at. When I work in the back end of people's businesses, I can see all of these small nuances that need fixing at the same time as I can see the big vision of where their business could go. That's my personal trait. It's part of why I have a lot of air sign in me as an Aquarius, but it's also they are hunters. They are honed in on what they want, and they're not going to give up. Hawks, actually reading the book all about hawk personalities, hawks get really annoyed, really annoyed. They are moody birds. They are not like nice, compassionate, give me a cuddle birds. No. They are, I will kill this and you, and I will make a scene, and I will remember, and I will hold a grudge. And that's fire energy for you, right? It's, I want that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to get that. I'm going to achieve that. And I'm going to hold a grudge until I do. Now, not grudge in a sense of I've got a massive chip on my shoulder, but you can have a grudge in a sense of I'm going to do that thing. I'm going to prove everyone wrong. And that's part of my fire energy. So it's determining that message for you and aligning it with your personal values. Making it personal to you is part of the alignment. There's no point receiving a message, interpreting it in a way that is so detached from you. It's actually about making it connect to you, finding that connection for you, because that's what a message is. The universe communicates in ways that you can understand. It's all about that, 100%. And then you need to take action, right? I'm going to say this every single podcast, and I'm going to say that also in every single podcast. Energy does not want to stay still. It needs movement. It needs action. You need to take aligned action. So you want to ask, again, if it's then like, okay, I've received a message, I'm not sure what it means, looking and evaluating it. What does it mean to you? What does it say online? So what is your intuition telling you to look at online or in a book? What that means? How does that align with me, my purpose, my actions, and my values? How does that align? So that then you can say, what is it probably telling me to do? When did it show up? What was I thinking about? Should I do this? Yes or no? If you want to ask for an additional sign, should I do this? Yes or no? Same way I asked, I saw 3 sitting down and I was like, is this it? Have I finished? Have I finished building this right now? Is this what it's supposed to be? Yes or no? If it's yes, show me another hawk sitting down. And then I got that. You can do that. If you are scared to take that action, ask for an additional sign, ask a different question and ask for the answer. But please, when you get that answer, please act on it. Right? This is the thing with energy. Energy wants to move. So taking that action. And the thing is then you can evaluate and adjust. So even when I knew that the course or option, the one-to-one was finished, I didn't know what it then looked like in the next phase. So as I'm thinking about that, what does it look like in that next phase? Now that I know that that's done, I still get another sign, which is the launching one. Now, if there is something, I'm not saying that my program and offer is fully finished forever, because people are going to go through this. I'm going to adapt it and I'm going to change it. I'm going to evaluate and adjust as time goes on. So this is the thing with signs. Don't take it as the end result, because time and energy is always moving. But it is the result you need right now. It is the sign that you need right now to take that action. It will always be moving you. The universe will always be moving you towards something that is supposed to be happening. So be aware of that energy. I really, truly encourage you to fully interpret the signs that are in front of you, no matter how big or small. If you see something repeating itself, especially 3 times and more, the universe is trying to talk to you. Look into what it means. Take a leap of faith. Try listening to what the universe is saying. Interpret that sign so that it makes sense to you and then act on it. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and I'm so glad that I could start to share the episode about the hawks, because honestly, it's been a beautiful ride. And the last few weeks now that I'm up and running, I haven't seen one. I've seen the statues, but those are statues that I have seen forever now. But I haven't seen any flying. And it's kind of that, like I said, the full circle is such a powerful tool. And I'm just so grateful to the universe that I've been able to listen and take those messages, because I've always been able to work with signs in that way, but this was a whole new level. So if you start working with signs, drop me in the DMs, like, let me know. I want to share it with you. And if you're interested in working with me one-to-one to discover all about that kind of thing within your business, how to ask for signs, listen to signs, and put it into your aligned action, you can work with me within BU Energy Framework in BU Aligned. I will drop all of the information below. And until next week, have a great week.